Hi, everyone. Welcome to our podcast. Today, we have our San Jose State University Public Health 104 Group 11 podcast. I am Asiya, and I have four of my peers with me. That is Ali, Melina, Esmeralda, and Vanessa. And today, we will be talking about burnout in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have chosen this topic because burnout is essentially something that all college students and individuals face on a daily basis. And we want to create more awareness around this issue. To start us off, I will be providing a statistic that comes from an article provided by The Optimist, which states that in August 2020, about 40% of students were facing burnout. However, as the COVID-19 pandemic continued, there were 71% of college students facing burnout by April of 2021. This then leads us to our next question, which is about COVID-related behaviors and how do my peers feel that burnout has been influenced by the pandemic?
Okay, I could start off because I think that I have a really unique situation here because I actually wasn't that affected socially when the COVID pandemic hit and everyone was in quarantine. But I was impacted in one way in particular, and that was I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with my friends on Friday, and I did that in person. And Dungeons and Dragons is a game that, you'd sit together like in a big circle and you'd role play like heroes and villains and you'd go on quests. And it was really hard to when COVID hit because we couldn't do that and we had to transition to an online format. And everyone had unique techniques and we had connection issues and it was terrible. So this actually over time, it affected me a lot, and I think it really contributed to burnout with me.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Ali. As for me, I would say that just the whole COVID experience made me feel burnout in the aspect of feeling stressed out, of not knowing what's next, what's going to happen, because it came to a shock to a lot of us, to the whole world, not knowing when it's going to be over or how things are going to be, jobs, school. So all those aspects just piled up and, created me to be stressed out on what's the next step and how can I survive this horrible thing that was happening to the whole world. Yeah, that's part of my experience.
For me, just to add to that, I feel like it burnt me out so much in the way that I wasn't following a schedule anymore. When I was in school, like on campus, it was easier to have a schedule because you couldn't work around like Zoom meetings and all of that. I feel like Zoom meetings made it easier to convince myself that I could do multiple things at once, which we all know it's probably not the best idea when you have like important classes and stuff. Like subconsciously I would be like, okay, class starts at this time. And then, after that I could do this and that and other things. And eventually it just all started to feel like it was way too much. I was putting too much on my own plate. And I feel like that alone led to a little bit of a burnout where I was just putting too much on my plate that I necessarily wouldn't do when I was able to keep that on campus classes structure that we normally have, but we had before COVID.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Esmeralda. Now that you mention it, I think I also faced a lot of burnout from online classes. I kind of think that some professors, with the transition to online classes, they thought that since it's online, the class would be easier because students have access to the internet and the professors can't like watch over them. So they ended up giving me like a lot more homework and that made like classes really difficult. And I think I really struggled in that regard.
Mm-hmm. So something I personally ended up having to learn how to do was setting aside that Zoom class time specifically just for that class, and adding an additional 30 minutes before and after the class so that I wouldn't feel the burnout. And also for like homework assignments for online classes, I would subconsciously and consciously like schedule it into my schedule. So if I didn't have any classes on a Tuesday, I wouldn't say it was a free day. Instead, I would schedule in homework assignments like start of the week. So that way I was able to see what I had to get done before class started and before due dates and stuff. That way I wasn't cramming everything and kind of procrastinating due to the lack of that structure. What were you guys doing?
Yes. So as for myself, in order to have potentially prevented burnout, something I did was I purchased a calendar and an agenda, just so I could keep my schedule organized, my classes organized, and have just appointments and just anything important that I had to do. Just make sure I had it there visually where I could see it, and that way I'm not piling too many responsibilities, causing burnout. So that has really, really helped me in the long run. How about the rest of you guys?
I also did a similar tactic where I would kind of schedule all my classes and other meetings and responsibilities. And every day I would create like a task list. So then I would kind of motivate myself to work on assignments or get things ready ahead of time. I started procrastinating during the pandemic, and I tried to motivate myself to get things done ahead of time, even if it was like a week ahead. I felt that like when I got things done a week ahead, I was more motivated to kind of continue that momentum. And I also didn't have a lot of work piling up, which minimized burnout for me. What about everyone else?
Something that I also wanted to touch base on was the idea of like self-care, for example. I think academically burnout is really easy to experience, but at this time when we were facing the heightened time of the pandemic, it was really important for me as an individual to ensure that I was taking care of myself, my mental health, and just feeling good about myself before tackling on academic projects. And so something that I really took into consideration was to use an agenda to also schedule and sketch in times where I could work on myself or prioritize myself. And even today, fast forward a couple months or even 2 years after the initial outbreak of the pandemic, I still continue to do this. And it's something that has really helped me prevent burnout throughout the past couple months, especially as a college student.
Yeah, I think that taking care of your mental health really did help me with my burnout as well, because before the pandemic, I wouldn't used to like exercise or do anything, but I found that going on hikes actually helped me a lot. And I've been to like Los Trampos many times. I've also been to Muir Woods, and really like being out with like all the greenery, and it's like a really special environment to just like be in. And I think that also helped me a lot with burnout.
Yes, piggybacking onto what you said, I also agree that physical exercise did actually help me a lot. Personally, I do have a dog, and he loves to go to parks and play fetch. So he really did keep me distracted from what was going on and from experiencing burnout. So we would often go to parks and go for walks, as well as go to hikes and just try to ease my stress. Anybody else have any similar?
Yeah, so I agree with you on the physical aspect of like physical activity and things like that make your body feel more like you're exhausting the stress out. So I was actually investing a lot of time into going to the gym and stuff. I know a lot of gyms were closed, but there was a lot, thankfully, that were offering outside workout options, and my gym was fortunately one of those. So I was using that to my advantage, and it was nice experiencing like the outdoor setting of working out, because then you get like the fresh air and you still get that physical activity as well. So that was one of the things I started doing as far as self-care goes, as well as just making sure that I was taking care of like other aspects as well, like making sure I was like eating, learning how to do things like cooking and stuff was also very helpful in keeping my mind kind of in a state of like relaxation.
Yeah, as far as like hobbies and things like of that sort, I also started doing puzzles. I don't know if any of you guys did like little things like that just to keep your head out of, a negative space. So those are things that I also did during the pandemic.
Going off of that, I wanted to just basically touch base on a different question. How do you guys feel that your experiences with burnout or potential burnout throughout the pandemic has influenced you today? So, for example, I feel that my experiences with burnout throughout the pandemic really just had to do with my mental health more than anything. And today I have been able to prioritize my mental health. And in order to do so, I've ensured that I sketch time into my schedule to focus on myself, do things that make me happy. So with you guys, what are specific experiences that you have used to influence your success as a college student and as an individual today?
Sorry, Ali, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. So for me, what really helps for me is re-examining myself and really my life priorities. Because when the COVID pandemic hit, I was like really stressed out. And I really felt like I was chasing a moving goal with like all of the homework submissions and everything moving online and the uncertainty of the virus. So I found that really like re-examining what's important to me, what do I need to focus on, and when do I need to do that. I felt that this really gave me a semblance that I'm in control. And over time, I think that this helped me a lot with my mental health.
Yeah, so to add to that, I actually feel like my anxiety was bad before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit and I had to force myself to find ways to ease that anxiety that only kind of was starting to get worse. I did do therapy with a counselor that my medical doctor provided me contact to. But they basically provided me with like different ways that I could essentially like make mental like decisions on, okay, this is something I can control. This is something I can't control. And how can I control this situation in a way that's going to work for me in a healthy manner? Like, for example, I feel like a lot of my anxiety stemmed from not being prepared, not being organized. And so learning how to organize myself during the pandemic now has like benefited me so much, because I feel like now that we're not in a pandemic, I'm able to go to work, go to school, and do all of my daily needs. And now that everything is back to normal, I feel like I kept that structure of like being organized and keeping a schedule. Whereas before, even before the pandemic, I didn't have none of that. So I already had anxiety and it was bad. But now, outside of the pandemic, now that it's kind of coming to, I guess, some form of state of normalcy, it's helped me. It kind of opened up the doors to like reaching out for help and finding that solution to a problem that kind of only kept getting worse before I was aware of that. Let's say like skill of knowing how to be more organized and learning how to make my mental health kind of fit into my daily life and prioritizing my mental health as well. So all of that put together kind of helped me become who I am today in the sense of a more organized individual. And now burnout is still potentially like something that could happen to me, but I feel like I have the tools thanks to reaching out to that counselor and getting the help that I feel like I really needed before even the pandemic. So it kind of opened up a door into something I always needed. And now it's like something I was able to find a solution to. Have you guys ever, I don't know if that's too much information, but that's just my experience with my mental health and how I've found ways and resources to help me.
I feel like you brought up a really good point about having control over burnout. For me, I learned to acknowledge the fact that I have burnout. I feel like for some students, and I also experienced this as well, but I feel like sometimes we tend to kind of brush off burnout because sometimes burnout can feel like apathy, or you can feel like, oh, maybe I'm just really tired. And I feel like it's really important that we learn to acknowledge the fact that we are experiencing burnout so that we can kind of take a step back and strategize things such as self-care or spending time with pets or families, or even talking to a therapist or using resources at school. I think that's really important. And I think that's also how we take control over burnout. And I think that's kind of like, I guess, the positive of the COVID pandemic is I learned to acknowledge the fact that if I'm feeling apathetic or tired, or if I'm showing other signs of burnout, I am able to notice that those are the flags that I might have, and I should probably start strategizing to kind of minimize that.
Yes. Something you guys also mentioned, I also agree, is asking for help. I really wasn't the type to really ask for help. I don't know if it's just me, but I don't know, like I like to figure things on my own and just do it as I go. But I've learned after the pandemic that it's okay to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with it. We're all going through it, and we're not the only ones. And most likely others also feel like they don't want to ask, and possibly asking could help you and somebody else who might also have a similar situation as yourself. So definitely reaching out for help when experiencing burnout has really helped me a lot in my mental health.
Those are some great points, Melina. I completely agree. And to just move on and touch base with a different topic, I wanted to see if you guys have anything that you would want to tell future students about preventing or dealing with burnout, since we have all experienced that. Personally, to future students, I would just tell them to ensure that you are prioritizing yourself and your mental health. And if something is too much for you, there's always resources and people that you can see. I know that my fellow peers here also have some helpful resources that students can use to help with burnout. So I would love to hear from you guys about that as well.
Yes, I would like to let other San Jose State students, just like how I just mentioned, reaching out for help is okay. And luckily, San Jose State has multiple resources for us in helping us cope and helping us with our mental health. We do have a service called CAPS, which stands for Counseling and Psychological Services. They're actually located on campus at the Student Wellness Center on the 3rd floor. And basically what CAPS does is they are a free counseling services for us students. Whether we are struggling with stress or depression, anxiety, or relationship problems, CAPS is there to provide you and support you for whatever it is that you need to succeed. They are remote, and also they do in person. And they do have office hours Monday through Thursday. They do have a website that you guys could go ahead and click on, and their hours vary, but for sure this is a great service for us San Jose State students to reach out, and it's free, so why not just try it out and see what it could change. Did you guys have any other resources in mind?
Yeah, I think I have a important resource that could be really helpful. There's a phone number you could dial. It's called 988. And this is actually the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. But there's a lot of stigma around this name. You don't actually have to call this number if you're having suicidal thoughts or tendencies. Even if you're just having a bad day, you could call this number and you could talk to a live person. You could be directed to county resources. Really, if you're having any issues with your mental health, this phone number is a great resource for students. So I'd advise students to use this.
Also, if students may be struggling with like academic work, I would also recommend attending the Student Success Center. They have advisors that you can meet with for academic advising. There's also tutoring resources. So I would definitely recommend using some of the resources that the university has to kind of help with any academic workload.
Those are all great resources that us San Jose State students luckily have. I'm super fortunate to have these resources in hand.
Yes, I completely agree. I think that is a great way to end off our podcast. Those were amazing tips and tricks and just examples of how we have experienced and dealt with burnout in our own individual lives. Burnout is definitely something that will be here forever, in which college students, people in the workforce, anyone is able to experience burnout in any shape or form. I think it's very, very important that we establish awareness and address these issues, especially to our fellow San Jose State University peers. We thank you for tuning into our podcast, and we hope that you tune into our next episode. Thank you.